India has the fourth largest economy in the world, over a billion people, a space program, a growing tech industry. So why does its economy still look so different from the United States? In this video, we're breaking down the real economic gap between India and the USA, not with nationalism, not with pessimism, just the numbers and the structural reasons behind them. Let's start with scale. The US economy is worth around 27 to 28 trillion dollars. India's is around 4 trillion. On paper, that's roughly a sevenfold gap, but total GDP only tells part of the story. The bigger gap shows up per person. The US has a population of about 340 million. India has over 1.4 billion, more than 4 times as many people sharing a much smaller economic pie. That means GDP per capita in the US sits above $80,000. In India, it's closer to $2,500. That's roughly a 30 times difference in average income per person. This single number, output divided by population, explains more about daily life, infrastructure, and competitiveness than almost anything else in this video. The gap isn't random. It comes from very different starting points. The US industrialized in the 1800s, built deep capital markets early, and emerged from 2 world wars as the world's dominant economy with intact infrastructure while competitors rebuilt from rubble. India, by contrast, spent nearly 2 centuries under colonial rule, which drained resources and left it with low industrial capacity at independence in 1947. For decades afterward, India followed a closed, heavily regulated economic model, sometimes called the License Raj, that limited private enterprise and foreign investment until reforms began in 1991. That's a roughly 45-year head start. The U.S. economy had simply from history and policy choices, not effort or talent. Even after 1991's liberalization, several structural issues keep
This
India
broken
behind.
road and this
Infrastructure,
useless port.
roads, ports,
That
and
factory
power
is so
supply in
far.
much of India still lag what's needed for large-scale manufacturing. Logistics costs in India run noticeably higher as a share of GDP than in the US or China, making Indian exports less price competitive. The US, and especially China, built enormous manufacturing capacity decades ago. India's manufacturing sector still makes up a smaller share of its economy than policymakers want, partly due to land acquisition difficulties, labor law complexity, and capital costs. Education and skill mismatch. India produces huge numbers of graduates, but employability gaps are common. Many graduates lack the specific skills employers need, particularly outside elite institutions. Capital markets and ease of doing business. Starting and scaling a business in the U.S. benefits from deep venture capital markets, strong contract enforcement, and faster bureaucratic processes. India has improved here significantly but still ranks behind on regulatory speed and contract enforcement. A huge share of India's workforce, by some estimates more than 80%, works in the informal sector with lower productivity, no benefits, and limited access to credit. This pulls down average productivity figures nationwide.
Where's India actually winning?
India is currently the fastest-growing major economy in the world, with growth rates often above 6 to 7% annually, compared to the U.S. typically growing 2 to 3%. India has a massive demographic advantage, a median age around 28, compared to about 38 in the U.S. That means a much larger working-age population for decades to come, while developed economies face aging populations and shrinking workforces. India's digital public infrastructure, like its unified payment system, has made digital transactions faster and more widespread at the consumer level than in much of the U.S. And global companies are increasingly diversifying supply chains away from China, with India positioned as one of the main beneficiaries of that shift. The real question isn't whether India will overtake the U.S. in total GDP. It might, simply due to population size, within a few decades. The real question is, when India closes the gap in GDP per person, the number that actually reflects living standards, infrastructure, and individual purchasing power. Most economists agree that requires India to sustain high growth for 30-plus years, continue manufacturing and infrastructure reforms, formalize more of its economy, and convert its demographic dividend into actual employment, something that requires creating tens of millions of new jobs each year. The U.S., meanwhile, isn't standing still. It continues to lead in advanced technology, capital markets, and high-value industries like AI, semiconductors, and finance. So this isn't really a race with a finish line. It's a long structural transformation that India is still midway through, while the U.S. is defending a head start built over more than a century. India isn't behind because of effort, talent, or potential. It's behind because of history, infrastructure, and decades of policy choices that are only now being corrected. The numbers say India has a long way to go. The trend says it's heading in the right direction faster than almost any other major economy. If you found this breakdown useful, subscribe for more deep dives into global economics, and let me know in the comments which country you want compared next.